AI is, well, it's everywhere right now. I mean, it's completely dominating the headlines. It's the centerpiece of every single consultant presentation you see.
Oh, absolutely.
And in boardrooms all over the world, it's being pitched as this silver bullet,
Yeah.
promising, 70% cost savings, complete automation, explosive growth.
Everything. The whole package.
But what if we told you there's a massive systematic lie at the very heart of this whole technological revolution? A lie that is right now wasting millions, if not billions of dollars globally.
And that decision makers, maybe you listening to this, are being actively misled.
That's a strong statement.
It is, but that aggressive, almost shocking statement. It's not hyperbole. It's actually the core, very deeply researched thesis of the book we're diving into today. It's called The AI Lie. What the industry conceals and decision makers need to know.
And what makes this source material so compelling, so valuable, is the author Robert Meyer.
Exactly. He's not some external academic critic looking in from the outside. He is a total insider.
He's a veteran consultant, right? With something like 15-plus years of experience.
Yeah, and for the last few years, he has been working directly on AI implementation projects. He's been in the trenches, witnessing these failures firsthand. So, he's taking a pretty significant professional risk to publish these truths.
And the shocking premise he unveils, it isn't just based on, a few stories from the field. It's grounded in some very hard data.
Right. He highlights right up front this 2025 MIT study, and the finding is, well, it's absolutely brutal.
So prepare yourself for this number. The study found that 95% of all AI projects and companies
Fail to achieve measurable ROI or demonstrable business value, that is. That's almost universal failure.
95%. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second.
Think about what that actually means. It means if you are sitting on a board today and your company has, let's say, launched 10 AI projects, statistically, 9.5 of them are going absolutely nowhere.
And Meyer's really clear about this, isn't he? He says this failure rate is especially acute for the buzziest, most expensive things right now.
Oh, yeah. Generative AI projects, the ones aimed at replacing customer service or creative functions. That's where the failure rate is off the charts.
That 95%, that's the dark side that the industry, the big consultancies, and the venture capital world just never, ever discuss.
Never.
You only ever hear the success stories. The one company in your sector that found the perfect tiny niche application hit the jackpot and is now plastered all over every trade journal and conference stage.
Exactly. But the hundreds, maybe thousands of other companies that quietly burn through millions of dollars, they're completely silent.
Why?
Well, they're bound by NDAs, for one. They're worried about their reputation, and there's the internal politics of shame, right? No one wants to admit they failed, so they write off the losses, they bury the bad news, and they just pretend it was a, quote, learning experience.
And that silence, as Meyer argues so convincingly in the book, isn't an accident. It's systematic.
It is. He has a term for it. He calls it the silence cartel.
The silence cartel. Okay, we're definitely going to have to unpack that later.
So our mission today is really to cut through that silence for you. Whether you're a consultant out there pitching these solutions or you're a C-level executive deciding where to put your next big capital investment, we want to arm you with the knowledge of why those 95% fail.
So you can structure your projects, your partnerships, and your strategy to land squarely and hopefully securely in that successful 5%.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's get into it. And I think we have to start with the real, tangible costs of these systemic failures. Because these aren't just, small pilot projects that cost 20 grand. These are corporate giants losing absolutely colossal sums of money.
And not just money, reputation, time. Time that could have been spent on things that were actually profitable.
Exactly.
Meyer makes a really good point here. He argues, and I think he's right, that the best learning for any decision maker comes from the well-documented failures of others.
As long as those failures are analyzed honestly.
Yeah, that's the key. And so we're going to look at 3 very specific, very high-profile examples from the book. They really illustrate the different ways these projects can just completely collapse.
And it's good range, too, right? We're talking cutting-edge health tech, massive retail automation, and even just, a simple customer service chatbot.
Right. It covers the whole spectrum of the hype.
So let's start with what was, arguably the most spectacular and expensive cautionary tale from the early days of the AI hype. IBM Watson for cancer diagnosis.
Oh, this one is a classic. This partnership, it was announced with just a huge amount of fanfare back in 2013. It was IBM and the, world-renowned MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston.
And this was supposed to be it, the big inflection point. This was when AI, and specifically Watson, the system that famously beat the human champions on the TV show Jeopardy, was finally going to revolutionize medicine.
Precision medicine, to be exact. The promise was just. It was awe-inspiring. Watson was going to analyze individual patient files. It was going to scour hundreds of thousands of medical studies, clinical trials.
Interpret complex genetic data.
And armed with more knowledge than any single human doctor could possibly retain, it was going to provide these perfect, individualized therapy recommendations.
The ultimate medical expert in a box.
That was the pitch. And the investment was, well, it was monumental. A commitment of over $60 million.
$60 million.
Oh, over just 4 years. And MD Anderson, they invested heavily. They were integrating Watson into their clinical workflow, their personnel. They were all in. They were completely convinced this was the future of oncology.
And the reality, what actually happened.
The reality, which came out in an internal audit report in 2017, was, to put it mildly, a catastrophe.
A $60 million catastrophe.
You got it. MD Anderson abruptly ended the project. Watson just could not deliver. And in fact, its performance was often worse than a junior resident, a human doctor just starting out.
So what was the core problem? Meyer has a term for it in the book, doesn't he?
He does. He calls it the textbook illusion.
The textbook illusion.
Okay.
Explain that, because that sounds like a really critical failure in the whole philosophy of how you train an AI.
It is. It's fundamental. Watson was trained primarily on data from another famous cancer center, Memorial Sloan Kettering. But here's the massive catch. It wasn't trained on the full, messy, historical records of real patients.
It wasn't. Then what was it trained on?
It was trained on idealized, synthetic, textbook-perfect cases. Think of it like this. The training data was like clean laboratory examples. A 55-year-old patient with a very specific type of stage 2 cancer, no pre-existing conditions, totally compliant with all the past treatment protocols.
The theoretical patient, the one you read about in a medical school textbook.
Precisely, but that's not who walks in the door at MD Anderson. The real patients are messy. They're 72 years old, they're stage 3, they might have severe congestive heart failure, type 2 diabetes.
A history of allergies to common drugs.
And they've already tried 3 different treatments with varying levels of success. Meyer really emphasizes that Watson hadn't learned to deal with any of these complications, these comorbidities and complex histories that's just real-world pathology.
And the consequences in medicine are severe. It's not just financial. This is where that $60 million lesson gets pretty dark.
Absolutely. Meyer cites specific and, frankly, dangerous failures. There's one widely documented case where Watson recommended an aggressive, highly toxic chemotherapy cocktail for an elderly patient.
Okay.
And this patient had severe documented heart disease. Now, that specific chemo protocol, it might be the standard of care for a young, healthy patient. But giving it to someone with heart failure, it could have been immediately and fatally contraindicated.
So the treating physician, the human doctor, had to step in and overrule the AI.
Correct. And that just highlights the 2 major technical failures here. First, you have the specific failures, like recommending drug combinations that were contraindicated, which violated established medical guidelines.
And the second failure.
The second, and maybe more fundamental one, was the total lack of trust. It was due to what Meyer calls the black box of death.
That's a powerful term, black box of death.
It is. And it gets to the heart of the problem. The doctors, they couldn't understand why Watson made its recommendations. The reasoning was completely opaque, hidden inside this incredibly complex deep learning model.
Right, so you just get an answer, but no explanation.
And in medicine, accountability is everything. It's paramount. If a mistake costs a life, a doctor has to be able to stand up and explain, step by step, the clinical justification for their decision.
You can't just say, the computer told me to do it.
You cannot outsource accountability. Without that transparency, without explainability, the AI is useless in a critical life or death scenario. It's a non-starter.
And beyond that, Meyer also notes the failure of the generalization test. This seems to be where a lot of these big data projects stumble, isn't it?
It's the definition of failure in applied machine learning. The system was mostly trained on tons of data related to breast cancer.
Because it's common and well documented.
Exactly. But when it was confronted with rarer, more aggressive, or less common cancer types at MD Anderson, the kinds of cases a leading research hospital sees all the time, Watson was just completely lost.
It couldn't generalize its learning.
Not at all. It couldn't take what it learned from one type of cancer and apply it to another. It was like
Yeah.
it was trained to recognize apples, and when you showed it an orange, it just guessed wildly. That generalization failure alone completely torpedoed any promised utility.
So that $60 million lesson should have been enough, you'd think. But the hype machine just kept on rolling in other sectors.
It always does.
Let's move from life and death medicine to the controlled chaos of retail with the highly publicized Amazon Just Walkout system.
Yes. This was Amazon's magnificent vision, wasn't it? The future of frictionless retail.
The promise was so simple. You grab your items and you just walk out. No scanning, no cashiers. Everything is tallied up perfectly by this complex web of computer vision, cameras, and sensors.
And the investment was, again, just massive. It's estimated at around $1 million per store.
$1 million.
Just for the hardware, the sensors, and the software integration required per store.
Wow. I mean, that vision was so seductive for customers, but probably even more so for the CFOs who were looking at eliminating all those labor costs.
And this is where Meyer provides the silent truth. The part that was exposed by investigative reports that Amazon was, let's say, desperately trying to keep quiet. It was pure AI washing.
AI washing.
The system was fundamentally not autonomous. Meyer reveals that behind the scenes there were over 1,000 employees.
1,000.
Over 1,000, mostly located in India, who were manually verifying up to 70% of all transactions in 2022.
Wait, hold on. 70%. Are you telling me that Amazon's futuristic trillion-dollar AI was basically just a remote viewing room staffed by hidden cashiers who were watching videos and processing the transactions by hand?
That is precisely what the sources in the book indicate. I mean, just think about the logistical complexity of that failure. When the cameras couldn't figure out if a customer had swapped an item from their left hand to their right,
Or if a kid grabbed a candy bar and put it back on the wrong shelf.
or if two customers walked out at the exact same time, the system would just flag it. And that flag would go to a human who then had to sit there, watch the video feed of the entire interaction, piece it all together, and then manually confirm the purchase.
1,000 hidden cashiers. I mean, that completely defeats the entire premise of cost saving and efficiency.
Completely.
So why? Why did a giant like Amazon, with literally unlimited resources and the best computer scientists in the world, still fail so spectacularly at this?
Because it just perfectly highlights the massive limits of computer vision in uncontrolled real-world chaos. This is a key theme of Meyer's analysis.
He works in the lab, not in the wild.
Exactly. Computer vision systems are excellent when the conditions are fixed. Think about robots on an assembly line, putting together identical components under perfect fixed lighting. But a retail store? Reality is messy. The light changes. You have shadows, reflections on the polished floor, people wearing hats.
People exchanging items, or even just picking up a product to read the label and then putting it back.
Right. And this is the core problem. The AI sees movement, but it really struggles with causality and intent.
The intent to buy.
Correct. The core difficulty is understanding the intent to buy. Did they put that candy bar in their pocket to steal it, or did they just put it there for a second because they needed two free hands to grab a bottle of water? The AI sees the movement, but a human staff member had to watch the video and determine the intent. That single technical limitation meant the required human in the loop was just huge, and it was all externalized.
And when you actually break down the economics of it, the system wasn't just unreliable, it was prohibitively expensive. This leads to what Meyer calls the cost paradox.
The math is just brutal. Meyer runs a very detailed cost calculation in the book, and it shows the true expense of all that hype. So, a traditional cashier, when you factor in wages, benefits, support infrastructure, it costs an American retailer about 50 to 75 cents per customer transaction.
Okay, that's our baseline.
That's the baseline. Now, when you factor in the $1 million per store hardware cost, the massive cloud computing infrastructure, and the salaries for those thousands of human verifiers, the Just Walkout system cost Amazon about $1.64 per customer.
More than twice the cost.
More than double the cost of just hiring a teenager to stand there and scan the groceries. That capital would have been better spent painting the store walls. It's an incredible misallocation.
The system was neither efficient nor reliable.
Not at all. And the successful alternative that Amazon eventually pivoted to really shows the path forward.
Or dash cart.
The dash cart. It's a smart shopping cart, but the customer still scans their own items. The human is still doing the primary data entry. The cart just provides technical support and verification. It's much less revolutionary, but as Meyer emphasizes, sometimes the boring solution that actually solves the measurable business problem is exponentially better than the sexy solution that doesn't work.
Let's move now from the giants, like IBM and Amazon, to smaller businesses. Meyer details the pain that a lot of mid-sized companies are experiencing by succumbing to the chatbot hype.
Yes, and this example hits home for so many executives who are looking for those quick, measurable customer service savings, that 70% promise again.
So what's the case study here?
This case involved a German e-commerce company. They invested a pretty substantial 1.2 million euros.
€1 million plus. For a mid-sized company, that's a huge company-shaping investment. The CFO was probably banking their annual performance bonus on that outcome.
No doubt. And the investment was based purely on a consultant's promise of achieving 2/3 cost savings in customer support within 12 months. This is exactly the kind of project that C-suite executives are signing off on right now, trying to show momentum on their AI transformation journey.
And the result?
A complete inversion of the promise. The project was stopped after only 8 months, and get this, they had a staggering 40% increase in customer complaints.
An increase, so it made things worse.
So much worse. The chatbot didn't automate support. It became a massive source of customer rage and employee burnout. And Meyer identifies 3 critical errors in this failure that are unfortunately common across thousands of similar projects.
Okay, so what were those 3 killer errors that decision makers absolutely must watch out for?
First, and this is a big one, no realistic requirements clarified. The initial consultant analysis was just fundamentally flawed. They assumed that 60% of customer inquiries were simple, standardized questions that the bot could handle easily.
But in reality, that's never the case, is it?
No. As Meyer notes, variants are the rule. The customer who asks, "Where is my package?" is rarely making a simple request. They might have multiple open orders, they might have used 3 different shipping partners recently, or they've already started a partial return and now have a complex invoicing question.
And the chatbot, which was designed for simple FAQs, couldn't handle any of that nuance. It just delivered frustrating, generic answers, forcing the customer to repeat themselves over and over.
Exactly. The classic rigidity problem combined with complexity blindness. Second, and this is crucial, was the human-in-the-loop failure. The project design just assumed this seamless handover. If the bot failed, a human would just effortlessly take over.
But the transition was, what, catastrophic?
Both psychologically and operationally. Operationally, the software was clunky. The human staff often didn't get a complete transcript of the bot conversation or a sentiment analysis score. They just got a notification saying customer X needs help.
So they're going in blind.
Totally blind. And the customer has already spent 10 minutes fighting with the bot, trying every combination of keywords, only to hit a brick wall. So when the human agent finally connects, they're inheriting an already furious, high-effort customer.
So the staff weren't saving time. They were constantly putting out these emotional fires that the bot had started.
Exactly. The overall system efficiency just plummeted. The chatbot basically acted as a filter that only passed on the angriest, most resource-intensive problems to the human staff.
So it automated the easy problems badly, and it made the hard problems even worse.
That's a perfect summary. And the third error, underestimated poor data quality. This is the absolute classic that kills, 80% of these projects. Garbage in, gospel out.
The bot was trained on historical support tickets.
Right, which were chaotic and unstructured. They were full of typos, inconsistent categorization, abbreviations, and incomplete notes written quickly by harried agents.
So an AI trained on chaotic data is just going to generate chaotic, inconsistent, and often ridiculous results.
Precisely. The data preparation phase, which should have taken months and probably eaten up 80% of the project budget, was rushed to meet some arbitrary deadlines set by the consultant. They threw messy data into a sophisticated model, they expected magic, and instead, they got an expensive disaster that actively damaged customer relationships.
The lesson here, for executives considering this route, seems pretty fundamental.
It is. Chatbots only work for truly highly standardized binary FAQs and clear linear processes. If you require nuance, context, emotional intelligence, or complex multi-layered problem solving, you are just wasting your money trying to replace human interaction with the current generation of generative AI.
So the total cost for that German company was €1.2 million spent on software and consulting.
Plus a measurable 40% loss of customer goodwill. These case studies just prove that the 95% failure rate isn't caused by random technical glitches. They are driven by systemic, predictable forces.
Which brings us to the next section of Meyer's analysis, the why.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. Meyer argues that these failures aren't just technical, they are deeply psychological and economic, rooted in how management thinks and how the industry actively conceals these outcomes.
This is the critical part of the book.
Let's look at the drivers of failure, starting with the psychology of AI hype.
Yeah, Meyer dedicates a whole chapter, chapter 7, to showing how these powerful cognitive biases and boardroom dynamics create this internal inertia towards failure, even when all the data is screaming for caution.
And first up is FOMO, the fear of missing out. This drives rapid and often pretty reckless decision-making at the highest levels.
Absolutely. The pressure is just immense. Your competitor, Company X, just announced a big partnership with a major cloud provider to launch an AI-first transformation. The media reports are all celebratory. Your board starts asking, well, why aren't we doing that?
And that leads to these fast project starts with vague business cases and use cases that are chosen for their sex appeal and hype value, not for any genuine, measurable business necessity.
And that strategic anxiety ties directly into another classic mechanism Meyer identifies. It's the nobody got fired for buying IBM effect.
That's a historical truism, isn't it? It perfectly describes the career risk hedging we see today. Only now, IBM is replaced by the largest, most prestigious, and usually most expensive cloud provider or consulting firm.
It is defensive decision-making in its purest form. A manager who's facing a complex, high-stakes AI decision will often choose the safest, most globally recognized, and most expensive route.
Even if a smaller, more specialized, and cheaper solution would be technically superior for the company's specific needs.
Right. And you have to ask why. It's because it hedges their personal career risk.
Explain that.
Well, if the expensive, prestigious project with the marquee partner fails spectacularly, which statistically it probably will, the manager can stand up in front of the board and say, look, I hired the absolute best in the world. The problem was just fundamentally too complex for the current technology. Their personal liability is minimized, their reputation is somewhat protected, even as the company's capital is just going up in flames.
It's a self-preservation mechanism that prioritizes career continuity over capital efficiency.
That's it, exactly.
And once that decision is made and those first few $1 million are invested, the internal dynamic shifts again, and you get this deadly combination of confirmation bias and the sunk cost fallacy kicking in.
Yeah, this is where it gets really irrational. Once, say, 1.8 million euros or $5 million has been sunk into software licenses, consultant hours, data infrastructure. The project manager, the sponsor, often the consultant themselves, they all have a powerful vested interest in seeing the project succeed.
Or at least in appearing to succeed.
That's the key. So warning signals start to appear. Poor data quality, scope creep, the accuracy modeling comes back at 70% instead of the promised 95%. And they're just ignored. Or they're subtly reinterpreted.
This is confirmation bias in action, right?
Textbook. Managers selectively perceive information that confirms the wisdom of their initial decision, and they actively filter out dissenting opinions or hard evidence of failure. They lower the bar for what success looks like. They change the definition of ROI midway through.
And then the irrational logic that follows, the sunk cost fallacy, is often articulated in the boardroom with that single deadly phrase.
I know the one you mean.
We have already invested so much money. 1.8 million, we cannot possibly stop now, or all that money is wasted.
And Meyer stresses that decision makers have to recognize this as completely irrational thinking. That money is already gone. It is a sunk cost. The only rational question to ask is whether the next dollar invested will yield a greater return than if that dollar were immediately invested somewhere else.
Like hiring 5 more sales reps or upgrading the core logistics software.
Exactly. But ego, the fear of public failure, and loss aversion prevents that rational cutoff. So managers just keep throwing good money after bad, creating these zombie projects that limp along for years, consuming budget without delivering any real value.
So individual managerial psychology creates the internal inertia for failure. But the external market, the entire ecosystem, actively conspires to keep that failure secret. This is the silence cartel.
This is maybe the most cynical and perhaps the most crucial section of Meyer's book. It's not some shadowy meeting in a back room. It's an emergent phenomenon where every major actor in the ecosystem benefits economically from the narrative of success and is harmed by honesty.
The incentives are just systematically aligned to conceal the 95% failure rate.
Perfectly put.
So let's break down the actors in this cartel, starting with the role Meyer knows intimately. The consultants.
Consultants are the financial engine of the cartel. Their business model, at the end of the day, is built on selling hours, not on delivering success. So if they recognize a project is doomed after, say, 2 months of data ingestion, their ethical responsibility to the client is to recommend stopping the project immediately to limit the losses.
But stopping means losing that massive multi-year contract.
Exactly. The financial incentive, therefore, is to suggest the next, even larger engagement.
So the recommendation becomes,
It becomes, well, we've identified some significant beta challenges. This is going to require a 6-month data cleansing phase. Or the model is underperforming due to organizational complexity. We're going to need a 3-month change management strategy phase.
they lie by omission. They suggest more time, more budget, more phases, instead of just admitting the core premise was flawed from the start.
Right. And they ensure this failure doesn't come back to haunt them with NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. They're universal.
And these legally prevent the clients from speaking publicly about the project details, even if it failed spectacularly and cost them tens of millions.
Yes, this protects the consultant's reputation and ensures they can turn around and sell the same flawed, aggressive approach to the next nervous executive who's driven by FOMO. The client is both financially and legally silenced.
Now, I have to challenge this point a little bit. What about the media? Shouldn't robust journalism act as a check and balance here? Why aren't we seeing more big investigative reports on the biggest busts?
That's a fair question. And Meyer explains that the media, too, is incentivized by the hype. They prefer the AI will revolutionize X stories because those generate clicks, they secure advertising revenue, and, critically, they guarantee continued access to major company executives and brand leaders.
So a complex failure story is just not as appealing.
Not at all. A detailed, sobering investigation into why a mid-sized German factory needed 30% more staff after a $2.8 million automation project. It's technically difficult to pull off. It takes months of work, and it risks severing the relationship with the company you're investigating and their whole PR machinery.
So they become passive participants, cheerleaders, really, rather than critical reporters of the technology.
Precisely. The complexity of analyzing failure, combined with the risk of losing access to the biggest names in the industry, just makes failure coverage a losing proposition for a lot of media outlets.
And finally, the investors, the venture capital and private equity firms, they play a huge role in maintaining this illusion of perpetual success.
They are the narrative custodians. They absolutely need to maintain the positive AI is booming narrative to justify the extremely high valuations of their portfolio companies and enable those lucrative exits.
If they were honest about the failure rate.
If they were honest that, 9 out of 10 of their AI startups are struggling with basic data ingestion or lack a clear path to profitability, the entire market valuation would crash, and that would compromise their ability to raise their next fund.
So they have to keep the pretense going.
Yes, and this results in the creation of what Meyer calls zombie companies. These are startups that are technically bankrupt or have demonstrably failed to secure product market fit, but they're kept alive through these minimal follow-up funding rounds.
And that funding isn't meant to save the company.
No, it's meant to delay the public admission of failure. It protects the fund's internal metrics and their valuation narrative until a better distraction comes along.
So the bottom line, across these three actors, consultants, media, and investors, is a marketplace that is based on systematically flawed, biased information.
Which leads to wasted resources, distorted decisions for new entrants who only ever see the success theater, and a slowing of real, honest innovation because the necessary lessons from failure are never shared.
It really makes this book, written by an insider, incredibly valuable.
You, the decision maker, have been operating without a true picture of the risks involved until now. You've only been shown the 5%. Meyer's basically giving you the playbook for the 95%.
So if the diagnosis is systemic failure, both technical and psychological, we need to pivot sharply to the prescription. Meyer's book provides extremely actionable knowledge. It's designed to ensure that your project lands decisively in that successful 5%.
Right. Part 3 of the book is dedicated to exactly that. And we start by identifying and mitigating the 7 most common killer errors. These are the practical structural mistakes that decision makers must avoid. If you can just dodge these 7, you've already eliminated the primary vectors of failure.
Let's run through them with the detail Meyer provides. Killer error number 1, technology before strategy.
This is the mistake that's born from FOMO and boardroom panic. It's starting with the conclusion. We must implement generative AI instead of starting with the measurable business problem.
So a strategic approach requires that rigorous financial and operational analysis first.
You must. You have to ask the question, what problem is costing us X million euros per year? That initial low-tech assessment is crucial before you commit to some complex, expensive solution.
Meyer gives a good example of this, doesn't he? The logistics company.
He does. A logistics company wanted to optimize its route planning with a complex AI system. But their CFO, smartly, mandated that they first analyze the $2 million annual cost of delivery delays without even mentioning the word AI.
And what did they find?
They discovered that 60% of the delays were caused by simple, non-AI problems. Things like drivers having to double-check paperwork manually or just poor communication between dispatch and the warehouse. They realized they could save half the money just by fixing those basic processes without installing a single AI model.
Technology must serve strategy, not the other way around.
That's the mantra.
Okay, killer error number 2, which we saw destroy that chatbot project. Lack of data quality or garbage in, gospel out.
This cannot be overstated. Decision makers fundamentally misunderstand the sheer complexity of data readiness. The tragic truth is that most companies have just atrocious data quality. And Meyer states that 80% of project time in successful AI initiatives is spent on data preparation, cleansing, and annotation.
80%, that's a huge number.
It is, because if the underlying data is inconsistent, biased, or incomplete, the model will simply amplify that organizational chaos.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Imagine your historical customer sales notes have 3 different spellings for the same major client: Acme Corp., ACME Inc., and Acme Corporation Ltd. To a human, that's obviously the same company. But the AI model sees 3 completely distinct entities.
So if you try to forecast purchasing behavior,
The model will deliver 3 different contradictory forecasts. That is chaotic output based on chaotic input. The unrealistic expectation that the AI can just magically sort out messy, unstructured data is what kills models before they even get to run.
okay, error 3, unrealistic expectations.
This is a failure rooted in managing hype. The consultant or the vendor comes in and promises 99% accuracy and 70% cost savings, and management just accepts it uncritically.
But planning for 99% accuracy is basically planning to fail.
It is, because in the real world, the data shifts, the processes change, complexity reigns. Reality, even for projects that are well suited for AI, is usually something like 85 to 90% accuracy and maybe 30 to 40% savings.
So what's the solution?
You have to define a minimum viable success and MVS and plan conservatively. You have to allow time and budget for the inevitable complexity of implementation and retraining the model down the line.
Error 4, change management ignored. The human cost of these implementations is often the fatal flaw.
Meyer highlights that even a technically perfect system will fail if the employees who have to use it feel threatened or aren't brought along on the journey. People are not machines. They will resist change if they feel their jobs are at risk.
You have to share the anecdote from the book about the quality inspector sabotage. That drives the point home perfectly.
It's a great story. It really illustrates the active human resistance that management so often fails to anticipate. So a manufacturing company installed this highly accurate computer vision system to automatically check for defects in their product line.
And this threatened the jobs of the human quality inspectors.
15 of them. Long-term employees. And because these inspectors were not consulted or integrated into the process, they just felt like they were being replaced, they collectively discovered a very specific minor angle of shadow that would occasionally make the AI misidentify a product.
So they learned to exploit this flaw.
They did. They started routing products through this AI blind spot to force the machine to make mistakes. They intentionally sabotaged the data input to prove the AI wasn't ready.
They protected their jobs by undermining the system's reliability.
Exactly. And the solution is so simple. You have to involve employees early, communicate with transparency, and make sure they feel the technology is augmenting their expertise, not replacing them. The AI should make their job easier, not eliminate it.
Okay. Error 5, vendor lock-in. This is a strategic killer that increases future costs.
Oh, this is a huge one. Relying entirely on proprietary big boxes from major cloud providers or niche vendors means you become perpetually dependent on one single entity for maintenance, for updates, for your future strategic direction.
So what should decision makers do?
Meyer insists that you must, from the very outset, insist on open standards, clear documentation, and ideally access to the source code of the models that are developed specifically for you. If you cannot switch providers or maintain the system with your own internal team, you are trapped. And the vendor can then charter whatever they want later for essential upkeep.
Which leads right into error 6, lack of internal AI competence. This goes hand in hand with vendor lock-in.
It does. AI is a capability that must be owned by the company, not a one-off project you purchase off the shelf. If you have no internal core team, no dedicated data scientist, data engineer, or ML engineer, you remain entirely dependent on expensive external consultants.
And as soon as the consultant leaves,
The system becomes a legacy artifact that no one internally understands how to monitor, debug, or retrain. It degrades rapidly and becomes another hidden cost in that 95% failure pile.
and finally, error number 7, no clear success criteria.
This is the managerial mistake that allows the sunk cost fallacy to flourish. Without smart goals that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, you can never evaluate whether the project actually worked.
And crucially, you can't justify stopping a failing project.
Right. If success is vaguely defined as improving efficiency, it can always be spun as a partial win, even if millions were wasted simply to protect the project owner's reputation. You have to define your kill criteria on day one.
Meyer's insider perspective provides a crucial and probably painful warning to executives about the people they bring in to solve these problems, especially with all the hype around generative AI tools like ChatGPT.
Oh, yeah. Chapter 5 is dedicated to the absolute nightmare scenario. He calls it the AI consultant without AI. This exposes the worst kind of AI washing, where clients pay these vast sums for what is essentially trivial or even publicly available technology.
And he details the staggering case of a large European insurance company.
He does. They paid 80,000 euros for a custom internal knowledge-based search system.
80,000 euros, that sounds like a standard integration project. What was the truth behind that price tag?
The system they delivered was essentially a ChatGPT copy-paste. It was a rudimentary Python script using the public OpenAI API with minimal data preparation. Meyer's internal analysis suggested this could have been built by a technically proficient intern in about 2 days for negligible cost beyond the API fees.
80,000 euros for a glorified prompt wrapper.
That's what it was, a complete waste.
So if managers are falling for that, is the problem really the consultant? Or is it a catastrophic failure of internal vetting and just basic technical due diligence?
It's both, but the failure to vet is ultimately the executive's responsibility. The consultant is just exploiting the manager's FOMO and their lack of technical comfort. And this is why Meyer provides a crucial bull detector in the book. He calls it his 10 red flags to recognize this type of fraud immediately.
What are the most important flags for our listener to spot?
They're pretty simple questions that executives just need to start asking. First, does the consultant promise way too much, like that 70% savings way too fast, like in under 6 months? That's a huge red flag.
Okay, what else?
Second, do they hide behind impenetrable jargon? Are they talking about stochastic gradient descent when they should be explaining the simple mechanics of the system? Third, and this is a big one, do they show surprisingly little interest in the messy details of your specific data? If they aren't obsessed with your data quality, they are selling you a standardized, non-customized product.
And crucially, do they push for long, non-breakable contracts without clear, measurable milestones that define both success and failure?
That is the essential signal. If they refuse transparency about the underlying technology, the total cost breakdown, or they push for multi-year lock-in without any measurable off-ramps, you need to pump the brakes immediately.
The core of Meyer's solution to this problem, to the fraud and the dependency, is surprisingly simple, isn't it? It's just to build internal expertise, even if that feels slower at first.
Absolutely. The math on this is irrefutable. Meyer points out that for the price of 6 months of a prestigious external consultant, which can easily be $150,000 to $200,000, you can hire a dedicated, full-time junior or mid-level data scientist for an entire year.
And that internal resource understands your processes.
Exactly. They begin to accumulate critical institutional knowledge, and they ensure you aren't perpetually vulnerable to external manipulation or lock-in. AI is only a real capability if you own the knowledge base.
So we know how to avoid failure with the 7 errors and how to spot a bad partner with the 10 red flags. Let's finish with the practical truth. which applications actually work, and Meyer's comprehensive 10-point plan for project execution.
Yeah, Meyer spent some valuable time in the book documenting the applications that demonstrably succeed because they avoid the pitfalls of generalization and messy data that we talked about earlier. They are focused, they are often kind of boring, and they have clear data inputs, measurable metrics, and manageable error costs.
So give us some examples of these proven working applications that actually belong in that successful 5%.
Okay, first, document classification. It works because it is a pure, simple, binary classification problem. You have thousands of historical labeled documents, invoices, claims forms, emails, and the AI just sorts them into clear categories. The data is structured, the goal is unambiguous.
And the errors are manageable.
Right, a human just reviews the 10 to 15% of documents the AI flags as ambiguous. It's highly efficient.
What's next?
Second, fraud detection. This works because AI is exceptionally good at pattern recognition in massive data sets, finding anomalies that human analysts would miss. Banks and payment processors have millions of transactions and clear historical labels, fraudulent versus legitimate. The value is incredibly high.
Preventing a single massive fraud event pays for the system many times over.
Exactly. And the data is clean and plentiful. Third, quality control via computer vision, but only under the strict controlled conditions we hinted at earlier.
Right. It works when the environment is controlled, like inspecting identical engine components on a conveyor belt with fixed lighting and fixed camera angles.
Yes, and it completely fails when conditions are chaotic, like in the Amazon Go stores. Success is all about managing those environmental variables.
Any other success stories?
Yeah, things like anomaly detection and machine sensor data spotting, tiny deviations that signal a need for predictive maintenance, and natural language processing for analysis, like summarizing thousands of customer reviews or automatically routing incoming emails based on intent.
But, and this is the key, explicitly not complex, empathetic, or generative chatbot interactions that are designed to replace the entire support team.
That's the bright line. Finally, Meyer synthesizes all this knowledge into his essential 10-point implementation plan. This structure is designed to protect decision makers from the seductive pressures of that 95% failure trap.
Let's highlight the 3 most crucial, non-negotiable takeaways from that 10-point plan. The things our listeners should embed into their project planning starting tomorrow.
Okay. Number 1, and I cannot stress this enough. Step 1, define the business case without AI first. Start with the measurable business problem, its cost, and evaluate non-AI alternatives like process simplification or basic database automation before you commit to a complex machine learning solution.
If an Excel macro can solve 50% of your problem, do that first.
Please, do that first. Next, step 4, always do a pilot instead of a big bang. The pilot should be small, manageable, say 3 months, 1 single department, 10 users, and it has to have clearly defined kill criteria.
And those kill criteria have to be agreed upon by the CFO and the project sponsor beforehand.
Before you spend a single dollar, if the pilot fails, you stop, you document the learning, and you try something else. Do not let sunk costs drive you into a company-wide failure.
And the last one.
And finally, step 10. Embrace continuous learning and maintenance. AI is never done. This is the part decision makers always forget to budget for. Data drifts, the world changes, competitors adjust. If you do not commit to continuous monitoring, retraining, and maintenance, which Meyer suggests requires budgeting 15 to 25% of the initial investment annually, the model will inevitably decay.
And its accuracy will plummet within a year to 18 months.
Guaranteed. AI requires perpetual care.
So what does this all mean for you, the decision maker? The AI revolution is absolutely real, but as Robert Meyer's work proves, it is currently obscured by this massive systematic layer of hype and concealment, the silence cartel.
The path to profitability is not the sexy headline. It is the rigorous, measured, and often boring path of clear strategy, clean data, and continuous maintenance.
Your knowledge, now informed by the harsh lessons of that 95% failure rate, is your shield.
It is. You now have the tools. The 20-question vetting checklist, the 10 red flags for consultant fraud, and the framework for realistic ROI calculation. You no longer have to succumb to FOMO or choose that safe but costly path of failure that protects a manager's ego rather than the company's bottom line.
The risk that Meyer took by writing this book, exposing wasted millions, employee layoffs, and ethical compromises within his own consulting industry, it really highlights the severe cost of silence. He's risking his professional relationships to make sure you don't make the same 80,000 euro mistakes.
And that leads to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. It's one Meyer addresses head on in the book.
What is it?
In your organization right now, which is more valuable, the ego that insists on pursuing a failing AI project because of millions in sunk costs and the fear of admitting a mistake, or the integrity required to stop it immediately, admit failure, document the learning, and redirect those resources toward a solution that actually works? The choice you make defines whether your AI journey ends in the successful 5% or the silent, costly 95.